Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Writers Chat. We're so glad to have you all with us today, whether you're here live, and we do have people live in the chat room, even two of our regulars who are so committed to Writers Chat, they went to McDonald's because they didn't have internet where they're staying, having a writing retreat. So thanks to you guys for doing that. That's dedication. My name is Johnny Alexander. I write fiction. I'm joined with my co-host and my daughter, Bethany Jett, who specializes in nonfiction and does a lot of marketing things. And our topic today is podcasting for writers. So we're very excited to have Britt Mooney with us. And Bethany's going to introduce Britt, and then we're going to just take it from there.
Let's go.
All right. So it's truly a privilege to have Britt on the show. I was blessed to meet him at the North Carolina Christian Writers Conference, I think a couple years ago, just in passing. And then he and his beautiful and amazing wife and their family hosted Michelle and I when we went to Catalyst this last year, and we did a writers event there. Britt is one of the coolest guys you'll ever meet. You will all be best friends with him by the time we're done with today's show. And he does some really cool things. So I'm just going to tease it because I want him to explain it better. But he works with Phoenix Roasters, and they are like the coffee company at Catalyst. Like, they give free coffee all day to the attendees, which is amazing. Everyone we met who was working behind the tables was just super friendly and just amazing. And that's a great story in and of itself. So I hope that you do share a little bit about that. We got to have our writers event in the warehouse of Phoenix Roasters, which was so cool. And then Britt also does this really cool thing with his writers group and a podcast called Brew and Ink. And so as a fiction writer, primarily, I think, Britt,
Yep.
It's so good to have you on here because we hear all the time, like, oh, fiction, it's not marketing or things that you can do here. And yet you are, because you've got this podcast that you're doing with your group. So let's just talk all about your life and all about these things that you're doing and podcasts, and take it away.
Yeah. Well, just a quick note about the coffee. You asked about that story, and I was telling it this morning at an event about how we started as a church, and we started as a church for kind of the broken and the hurting, and small church and community church. And when the recession hit in 2008, we kind of had to come down to a decision of whether we were going to kind of keep going, because a lot of our outside funding and donations dried up. And we had to make a decision. Are we going to keep going, or what are we going to do? And we had the idea, well, what if we started a business that funded some of the administrative costs of ministry? And that way we wouldn't have to burden the people that we were after, which were the addicted and the marginalized and the homeless and the people in crisis. And so we did that. We started a coffee company, and it has just grown, and God has opened door after door after door. And he's still opening doors. There's meetings with bigger companies now because we have a patent on our nitro system that has gotten us attention from some bigger companies. And our heart has always been we're gonna funnel as much of this as we can back into helping people get out of homelessness and addiction and missions and church planning and all of that stuff. So it's just been an amazing journey. So that's been cool. And I love that. But the podcast thing, you want me to tell you how we started the podcast? Is that where you want me to start? All right.
Let's do that. And then if people I was going to say, if people have questions about podcasts,
yeah.
Britt writes fantasy. He has, can we just real quick, can you tell us what projects you're working on, the books you've got, because you've got some cool stuff.
Yeah. So, I've self-published mostly up until now, and now there's this guy named Kyle. I don't know if people know him, but he's my agent, and so we're working on some of the fiction on that end. But fiction isn't doing as well as I know some people have seen, and if you talk with some of the on the club discussions. But being a pastor and being involved in some of these other things, I have a lot of nonfiction that I have as well. So the Phoenix Roasters story, which I just kind of told really quickly, is a book that's getting picked up by John Herring and those guys over there. And so I think that's just going to start just a series of things from that about what God's been teaching us. So I do nonfiction and fiction. A lot of my nonfiction is discipleship based kind of stuff, but and I think I'm going to be getting into some devotionals probably next year. I've got some ideas for those as well. But as far as fiction, it's been mostly fantasy, epic fantasy. People call it Narnia meets Game of Thrones. So take Narnia and make it a whole lot more violent and gritty, and that's pretty much what you got. It's really fun, and I just love to write, man. I just love to do it.
I think that's good. And you met John at a writers conference, I believe.
Yeah,
so
I met.
Plug for writers conferences.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time. There's a friend of mine who's a pastor and he's an author, and whenever we talk about it, he talks about how he wants to get his stuff out there, and I'm like, come to a writers conference with me. Come to Nashville. There's one going to be in Toccoa in Georgia. Like, come with me to a writers conference. Like, you're going to get so much more than you could just get from me and us having conversation. I can help him, but just so much you can learn and be connected in the networking. And that's really it. It's all about relationships. It's all about connecting with people, because most people don't get into writing. You guys know this, because they might think they want to make a lot of money, but you learn pretty quickly this isn't the way to make a lot of money. And so you got to do it because you love it, and you got to do it because you love the people that you're working with. And so I just think and I've learned a lot more about that just further down that road from you guys. I know Bethany and Michelle, just interviewing you guys and getting to know you, just your heart, and Kyle. So yeah, it's been good.
Yay! And speaking of that, like, Britt really represents like the culture of everything we try to do too. So you guys are gonna love this. All right, so let's jump into podcasts and writers groups, because you're combining two things that we always talk about writers groups a lot, like critique groups and having that connection with people. And then, but something that probably not a lot of us within Writers Chat do is podcasts. I'm interested because I want to start one. I know lots of people in here want to start one or in the process of starting one. And Britt, what do we do?
Yeah. Well, so just a little bit of for my background. Years ago, I was really into blogging, right? Mm-hmm. So years ago, I blogged just, I don't know how many times a week, but I just, I was really into the blogging thing. And, if I had been smarter, I would have tried to do ads or something like, I was big into that kind of blogging world. So when I'm going to these writers conferences and they keep talking about engagement, right? They keep talking about engagement. And then one thing they almost always, one of the first things they do is they talk about blogging. And I had gotten to a point where I was like, I don't read blogs anymore. Me personally, that's not what I do. I don't like sit around I'll read an article every now and then, but just for me, I don't blog. I don't read blogs like I used to. I listen to podcasts.
A trend though, like, I'm in a group right now. We're trying to discuss whether we want to do a blog as a group of authors, and nobody really wants to have one more thing to do.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's worth the time and effort anymore either. But we don't know. Is it or not? Bethany. Raise her hand.
Well, my experience with that is that the blogs that I think still work are mommy blogs. The blogs that I think still like if you can find something where you're giving practical information or coupons or blah, 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 what, like if you're doing something where you can give that on a regular basis, that's really practical, and you can, and moms, because moms are looking for this stuff all the time, and you can connect it with Pinterest and all that stuff. I haven't seen the engagement with blogs like it used to be. I see, and we can talk about how different it is with a podcast, but I just know people listen to podcasts. The people I know listen to podcasts almost primarily. And so that's just kind of the culture I was in. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to do something, I want to have conversations. I want to I have fun having conversations, and And I just, the more I thought about it, the more I thought it could be a creative way to, because people get to hear your voice, they get to hear you read your writing. I mean, depending on what your podcast is, they get to know you a little bit better, your personality, when they hear you, and obviously even better when they see you. But and some podcasts can go into the kind of the video stream as well. But, and I always thought that I had a great face for podcasting, obviously. And so I thought that would work, So I just, so for me, it was just a kickoff into, well, if I'm going to engage people, I want to engage them in a way that's creative for me, that I'm going to have fun with, and that something I want to build. And for me, it was a podcast. So I started talking to my friend Steven, who's in my writing group, and we just started, and I had an idea about like a choose your own adventure podcast. So I don't know if Bethany wanted to go back to the blog question at all.
Okay. So I love everything that you said. And I think too, I think blogging as like a personal diary or journal, which is what like it started out as, I think maybe that trend is going away. If you think about how you consume, I consume blogs when I'm looking for content, specific content, like Britt said. It's a resource. It's somebody saying, I checked out this program, here's my review. Like, that's the only time I'm really on somebody's blog, because the attention is on social media. And so I was thinking, Mom, for you, instead of doing a blog with all of these authors, why don't you guys have a Facebook page or an Instagram where you have a picture and then you're micro-blogging underneath of there, like taking turns. Now, like, that's what I would do, find the hashtags relevant for that instead of putting it, and then maybe have a website if you feel like that's necessary to hold the content. But like for Britt's recordings, like if I want to go find Brew and Ink podcasts, I might search his social, but it'd be faster for me to go to his website. Do you know what I mean? So the website and blog is like good for holding that content when we're searching online. But I think we have to think about where the attention is too, maybe how to best pull it in, and then how to host that info on our sites.
I think you're right. And I think too, it's like, and I don't want to get off of too much on blogging because that's not really why we're here, but it's like, even if you go to somebody's blog to read whatever it was that took you there, that doesn't mean you're going to go back and read all of their posts or follow them or anything. It's like you went for that specific reason and now you're off on something else. So it's just it's kind of hard to know what to do sometimes. So
I mean, my experience has been that Facebook specifically didn't kill blogging, but it definitely took the place of a lot of blogging, because Bethany's right. A lot of that daily journaling, that daily thoughts, those daily kind of things that you do, people do on social media. And so that's kind of taken that place. And then, so anyway, just for me, I was just trying to think what kind of podcasts. I had 2 ideas for podcasts, one for ministry and one for writing. And the writing one, I started talking to him, specifically Stephen in my writers group, because he and I had talked about doing some things like this, like video, like YouTube channel, like we talked about some things. And I just said, look, here's my idea. We have a choose your own adventure podcast where we might talk a little bit in the beginning, but every couple of weeks we read an episode, and then we give the audience 3 choices, and we let the audience, like we used it as a writing exercise, right? So like we led the story, in 1,000, 1,500 words up to a point of decision for the character, and then we let the audience choose what was going to happen next. And then that way, and then we let them vote for a week, and then the next writer would have to pick up with that choice. So the next writer is going to have to pick up the story and have a week, to write 1,000 words or 1,500 words and kind of bring it in. And so I just thought that would help with engagement. But podcasts are kind of hard with engagement, to be honest. Most people aren't thinking engagement when they're sitting around listening to a podcast. So we've had some ideas along those lines that we can get into. I don't know if you want to do that now, but just, just trying to, keep people listening. How are we going to keep people listening? And if we keep a story going, we keep choices going, we do cliffhangers, just basic stuff, but we're having fun and we're writing and we're getting better as writers because
Yeah.
We're having to do the whole keep the story moving. Like we can't just have like a scene where nothing happens. Like we have to keep that story moving somehow. And so I think it's made us better writers, and we get to have a lot of fun. And it's just opened doors for us as well. I don't know how much of that to get into next, but it ends up opening a lot of conversations, and it's a cool part of a platform that people enjoy that you do,
Yep. And podcasts save people time. I mean, we're watching, like, I would say we're watching this trend of like podcasts and video, but it's already here. Like if we're like, honestly, and I'm speaking to myself here because I haven't started a podcast yet, I'm already behind. And so like, this is like the time, like it's not something to put off for another 6 months or a year. I feel like if you're getting serious about really pulling in the engagement and starting this, like it's not novel anymore. Like this is something we should be doing because that's where the attention is, right? Like I can listen to Britt while I'm doing something else. And that's things we've talked about here before too. Like I don't have to watch the video, I can listen. And then I like what you said too about right where I'm going to pitch it back to you. I've got the website in the chat for those of you watching, brewandink.com, ink.com is the website. But, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. Dang it. There's something you said, and I'm like, that's gold. All right, well, I'm going to pitch it back to you.
Okay. Well, so for us, just to talk about just podcasts in general, and then we can, we don't need to stay on it too long, but just with podcasts in general, I know companies, like a lot of companies are looking for starting their own podcast because it is a great way to network. Even if they don't get a lot of listeners, they can go to not even just a competitor. They can go to a competitor, or they can go to someone they want to network and partner with, and they can say, hey, would you like to be on my podcast? Because here's the thing about interviewing people on your podcast is people love to be experts about something. So when you invite someone onto your podcast, you're making them feel important. You're making them feel highlighted. You're giving them attention, like they're part of your platform, and you're giving them, that you're highlighting them. And that sort of networking starts to really just expand. Like especially for my ministry podcast, I just thought I was just going to be interviewing my friends, but all of a sudden I'm interviewing authors, and I'm interviewing bigger pastors and guys with bigger ministries. And then the same thing with Brew and Ink. When I started interviewing some other authors and other people were more than willing to get on there and talk about something that they're good at, and that just connects you with people, and it gives good, you're being generous with people, like we've talked about with Bethany and Michelle, and it gives a good connection with people. You get to highlight who they are, and they get to feel like experts, and people love to do that, like I'm doing right now.
Well, that's right, because now you've had some experience, and there are people that want to know, how do we do that? So in fact, there is a nuts and bolts question here in the chat, if I can find it real quick, about someone asked, just got started in podcasting, what type of converter do you use? I record on Audacity, but it required a file converter, which she downloaded, and it slowed the computer down. So, that's kind of more of a technical, getting into the nuts and bolts bit of it. But you want to talk about that a little bit, about someone getting started with the equipment and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So for me, one of the reasons why podcast was attractive to me in the beginning was that I, as a musician, because I don't do enough in life, I'm also a musician, and I've got some recording equipment so I can do demos and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, I've got the microphone, I've got the this, I've got the that. And so I had some of that equipment already. And some of my friends who had started podcasts before me had contacted me about equipment. Like, what would you suggest? Because they knew I was a musician and stuff like that. And, they also wanted to use some of my old demos for maybe like intro music and stuff, so I met a few people, and I knew a few people who were doing it. So I really when I decided to do it, I just asked them what they were doing. And so, yeah, as far as I use GarageBand when I record, because I have a Mac and it just kind of all works very seamlessly. And GarageBand, because it's with Mac and iTunes, like you can really, you can make an MP3, you can make an audio narration kind of track really easily. And I've just used GarageBand and Logic, which is kind of the next step up, a professional level program. I've used that in the past, but I know people who have used Audacity to begin with. You can get a pretty inexpensive or free version of Pro Tools. Sometimes it'll come with the microphone. If you buy a microphone, sometimes it'll come with Pro Tools. Pro Tools is really basic. I know people who've used Ableton, but for us, I use GarageBand, and then Steven, when he does his editing on a PC, he uses Adobe Audition, which again is going to cost a little bit. But yeah, the free one is Audacity. And again, I just didn't need to go through all that, but I know people who have done Audacity, and you just need to export it as an MP3. I think, I don't know if there's what's any more kind of complicated than that, but that's what all these other ones do. You just export it as an MP3 after you do the editing in the software. And a lot of those softwares have, some basic vocal effects that you can use, and you just gotta kind of get in there and figure it out. And what's great about, of course I'm going to say this, and now you guys are going to go like, well, why are you here? But like, there's a lot of great YouTubes out there as well. Like, you just search for YouTubes on how to start a podcast, and they will give you tons of information on a lot of this stuff. So, and you have to have a hosting. All right, so you have to have a hosting site. I use Libsyn, Libsyn, Libsyn.com. That's what I use. That's kind of one of the older ones, one of the more established ones. But some of the newer ones that people like are like Podbean, Buzzsprout, and Simple. I think it's called Simplecast. But again, if you just start searching, and just try to find some of the better ones, because what you want is what I wanted. What you kind of want. I mean, if you just want to start and do it free, like there's some free stuff out there, but I pay a little extra so that I can have some data along with my podcast, so I can know how many times it's been downloaded, and and from where, and I've got access to some of that data, but you have to pay for some of that, but you're looking at, $15 to $20 at most, probably a month, to have some hosting with some data that you can kind of see how you're doing, right? You can see like, oh, on this day and this time, this is when people are listening, and this is where they're from. And, Bethany knows with a lot of that marketing kind of stuff, the data can really help you know, well, this is when we should do it, or this really worked. Or sometimes stuff works and you don't know why, right? You just kind of, you're like, well, how did we get 1,000 views today? Like, or downloads today? Like, how did we do that, right? And then I'm using right now, let's see if I can do this. I'm using my Yeti microphone. And I got this Yeti blue microphone because it's USB and it's portable. So because a lot of the interviews that I wanted to do, I wanted to have something that was portable. A lot of my music equipment that I had upstairs in my office is kind of all attached. Like, for me to like pick that up and move it was, I'm lazy, and I didn't want to do all that. So I bought, this microphone costs, $100 or so. And it's a great little microphone. So when you're getting started, you probably need something decent. You can pay anywhere from $50 to $100 for a decent kind of podcasting microphone. But they got some good YouTubes out there that kind of go through some of that, the different ones. So Yeah, I just kind of rambled there for a while.
No,
Did you want? Was there anything in there that you want me to talk more about?
I think that's good. And we did have a question in what to use for a PC in editing videos, which may be beyond what we can do right now. But do you have advice for PC users?
I mean, I would go for Adobe Audition. If you want to go free, I mean, Audacity works well. I think they have some Pro Tools versions that work on PC. But I'd go for the Adobe Audition or the free Audacity and just kind of work from there. And then because you want the quality to be good, but it doesn't have to be like broadcast, like I'm rocking out and mastering a song like with great equipment kind of good. Like it doesn't have to be like I'm recording a song for the radio, like narration it needs to be good quality, but it doesn't have to be sort of the best. So you can kind of start with something free like Audacity and Adobe, and you have to do a little bit of research to see, what kind of works with what with PC, right? I mean, PCs are kind of I love Macs for a lot of this stuff because I know if I get the right stuff, it's all going to work. I just go plug it in and it's going to work.
And it works together. Yeah.
So
that's the beauty of the Mac world is pull it out of the box and you've got everything you need.
Yeah. I see another question. Is there another question?
Okay. Yeah. What tip would you give someone who has not done a podcast before?
Like I said, I would try to find a way to keep it as simple as possible. Because the hardest thing is going to be consistency. Just like with anything, the hardest thing about it is going to be doing it on a regular basis. So the more complicated you make it, the harder it is going to be going forward and being consistent with that. So for me, it would be, you don't have to buy a new computer, just find something that works for now.
Right.
And do something that's consistent. We talked about this in Florida, and people didn't like the word I used, so maybe I'll use a different word. But but whenever you start anything, you're going to stink at it. Like whenever you start something, whether it's an IGTV, like I've been trying to do more IGTV, right? Or whether it's Facebook Lives, or whether it's a podcast, or speaking up in front of people. Like whenever you start doing it in the beginning, you're not going to be good. You're going to stumble over words. You're going to, whatever. The content may not be the best. You're going to have to figure it a little bit out along the way. So as simple as you can make it in the beginning, and make it as personal as you can. That would be my other thing. Make it personal, because the whole point, especially as a writer, is that people will get to know you, but people will like you. Like they'll listen to you and they'll keep coming back. Just like with emails, and I know, maybe Bethany can speak to some of this, but it's just basic marketing, right? Like you're giving value, you're giving, you're being generous with stuff, you're having relationships with people. Like, so you got to make it kind of personal and make it creative and have fun. Like no one's going to want to listen to a podcast where people aren't having fun, right? Yeah. And so I would say try to at least have one person that you can partner with in the podcast, because you can just start a podcast just talking, but people like to hear conversations. People want to hear people having conversations. And so that's been I say that, but then I did one episode of my ministry podcast a couple weeks ago, and that thing went through the roof, and it was just me talking. It was just me, talking on the podcast, doing a teaching on the podcast. So but people love to hear conversations where there's give and take, where people are excited about ideas together, where they're different people, but they're having relationship. And so try to find at least one person that you can kind of host with, or if you can't, just make sure you've got some ways to kind of ask people to be on it. But I think that makes it more fun, but it also makes it harder because you got to get two people together to, right? Just like
and you both have to work together and find time to do it and all that kind of thing. So would you suggest too, like maybe making sure you've got some episodes in the bank, so to speak, before actually launching?
That would probably be smart. I don't think I did that, but that would probably be smart. I mean, I'm not as smart as I look sometimes, and I don't really even look that smart. So, but no, definitely it's nice to work ahead.
Yeah.
With the kind of, especially with the writing podcast, the reason why we do every other week was because it's a lot to turn around between getting votes in and getting something written. And so you can't really work ahead. But when I'm doing interviews with people, I can work ahead. When I'm just doing interviews, I can work ahead, and I can just set up the microphone in the coffee warehouse like I did with Bethany and Michelle, and just push record and just go for it, and then I've got it recorded, and then I can manipulate it and edit it later, and put it out a month later. Like I'm talking with oh my goodness, what's her name? She just wrote the book and she was in Florida. Anyway, but I was talking with one of the people from Florida, another author that I know, Tina Yeager. I've been talking with her about doing a podcast, but I'm like, look, we can she was like, well, when would be the best time to do it? And I said, well, we can record it now, and I'll put it out when your book comes out. Like I'll launch the episode later. And so when I'm doing interviews, I do like to work ahead, because that gives me some time to promote people and do all that stuff ahead of time. So yeah, that would be good.
What you said about conversation, I mean, like my favorite podcast is always it's a mix up of all kinds of different content. Sometimes he's just talking about like a specific issue. Sometimes it's interviews. Sometimes it's keynote studies done where he does he starts the podcast off like addressing the podcast listeners. Like, here's what you're about to get. My favorite part of this was, here we go. And then it goes into a pre-recorded thing, probably from YouTube. So he's repurposing content onto all the different platforms. And sometimes like I'm in the mood to watch like a specific kind of content, or sometimes I just want to listen to the keynotes and things. So like like you said with Tina, like sometimes maybe recording even conversations that we have with each other, that could be of value for people as we're going back and forth. Even it doesn't always have to be so, I think people get afraid sometimes it has to be so professional. And yet with the access that people have to live streaming, it's no more is it like, oh no, my kids just walked in there. It was like, oh, haha, we saw, we got to, yay. But it doesn't like kill you anymore the way it may have 5 years ago, even, everything to be like spot on. Thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I was interviewing Shanti Feldhan, who did, For Men Only or For Women Only, those books. And I got to interview her, which was like, I mean, I give those books to people when, I do marriage counseling, so I got to interview her, and she and her husband are sitting there, and we're talking, and the cat keeps walking across the computer, and like, hanging up the call and doing all this stuff. And then my dog, Mabel, who you've met, Bethany, Mabel starts barking at someone out the window because, anyone walking within 100 feet is obviously trying to kill me. I don't know. So, all that stuff where, and it's the same reason you guys do the chats like you do them. Like, it's not just, you don't just say, okay, here you go, buddy, or whoever you are, just start talking. And we're not going to ask questions. We're just going to let you, people love relationship and conversation, and that's how we're designed. So yeah. So yeah, as much as you can do of that and make it natural and fun, like like you like each other, right? You know, like just have people that you like to be with, and you just get to have fun with and exchange ideas, and people really engage with that, I think.
I was thinking too, like thinking about any of us who have video content that we've already created, how to repurpose it. Like Mom, I was thinking about your like novelist and wine.
Yeah.
You're interviewing these amazing authors from some pretty big publishing houses, you know, as well as I mean, you just run the gamut. And like honestly, probably you've got the audio sound because you've been using Zoom. And so you could just batch like an hour a week, just filming like the precursor or whatever it's called to that. And then start putting these on there. I was thinking about Writer's Chat. We have so many episodes. Like we could just spend some time and say, hey, today we're talking with Britt Mooney. We hope that you guys like it. You know, boom, here's the show. And then you're introducing them to where they feel like they got a connection with you in the moment. And then they get to listen to something in the past. I mean, that would be a smart way, I think, to even start some of these things if it's the content is.
We Absolutely. Do have content. I mean, we both do, like you said. So it's like, you know, and it's like, but it's one more thing to do, you know. It's like, but yeah, the files are there.
Well, you know, but think about it as a writer, right? I mean, you know, if you go to these writing conferences, if you're listening or watching this and you know, you haven't been, but they're going to tell you get an email list, or they're going to tell you like all this stuff to do. And you're right. You've got this extra content or this extra stuff that you could use as a giveaway and get email addresses. You could use as ways to engage people that isn't just, oh, here's a short story. You know, this, you know, like we've done whole episodes that are bloopers. Like we've done whole episodes that are bloopers because, you know, when we're reading the story, like you think like you might be able to do a good job, but even though it's just couple people in a room and you're sitting there reading your story that you've written, you get nervous and you stumble over words and you know, you say something wrong and it sounds really weird and we laugh. And I mean, you know, but people love that kind of stuff like we were talking about. And you can have, however you can come up with repurposing some of that extra content and use it as a way to be generous, to give away instead of just throwing it away. You know, you might be able to build an email list or build some of your you know, social media or whatever it might be. And that's kind of that's part of what we do. You know, we try to take some of the stories that we're writing together and use that to get email addresses to build the platform even more, you know.
Great idea. Did we have any other questions in the chat, or is it about time to bring people back on? Bethany, your call.
I mean, Leslie said it helps to pre-record the show because it frees up time. She likes the live interaction of things, which I do too. I think that's great. And then Norma said, I love people being real, not giving off the perfect setting or the situation. Like, be raw and real and transparent, like all those words, like that is what I think it can help us, you know, for those of us nervous to start this, that takes a lot of the pressure off. I mean, this is a really great time to be building a platform and to be an author and a writer because of all the technology that we have. I mean, This is a great time to be alive. And like, even if, let's say, here's the thing, if a podcast, as we know it, may evolve into something else down the road, 10 years from now, but we had radio. I mean, so it's like, we're really just continually like evolving, but the principles are the same. We're listening or we're watching like on TV, or we're reading, but reading in different formats. And so like, if we can practice now, we'll be ready for whatever the next thing is that's coming. Probably a lot of virtual reality stuff is down the road. You know, we're already in augmented reality with social media. And
well, and a couple things to say about that. I mean, I know that for some people, even like $50 for a microphone still may be a little bit expensive, but you know what? There was a time when it was hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I mean, you know, so really things are so much more accessible now. And I use, I'm just using the microphone on my laptop when I do my Novelist Unwind, and it actually works fine. I mean, it may not be the most professional, but we have interviews that people listen to.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and
fine.
You know, when we were in Florida, and I couldn't remember, I was jotting down some notes. I couldn't remember what you said it was, Bethany, but there's one app where you can just record on your phone and launch a podcast from your phone. And even if you're just doing earbuds with their microphone on here, you know, I mean, I've got a microphone that I do with some Facebook Lives that I think was $20. You know, I mean, like it doesn't have to be super complicated in the beginning. Like I said, as simple as you can make it, even if it's just a bunch of free stuff. It has to be listenable. So you have to really, you're going to have to do some research. You're going to have to maybe do a couple of trial runs to make sure when you listen to it, you know, it's listenable, like it's understandable, and it's not, you know, too loud or too soft or what, you know, all that kind of stuff. But so it's going to take a little bit of work. But even if you just did your phone and earbuds with that microphone, I mean, I've seen people like do karaoke on Facebook Lives with just this microphone on there. You know what I mean? Like, and they build an audience. So it's really just about consistency, whatever can work for you, and just build it from there, you know?
And then the more you do it, the easier it gets. I mean, I know when we first started doing Writers Chat, it was just such a nerve-wracking experience. And the same way with interviewing authors for Novelists and Wine. And there are still sometimes there's an author that I'm going to interview that I just get all shaky inside because, you know, who it is. But, you know, it's like if I hadn't done Writers Chat, I would never have been able to do Novelists and Wine. So it's like you just, you know, you kind of grow with it. And the more you do it, the less daunting it is. And the mistakes don't matter so much because you just, you know, you're able just to, they don't stop you. You just kind of roll with them and it's okay. So I guess my main advice is just, if you want to do it and just do it. However small you have to start and then work your way up and just get that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you know, as I've taken a couple of Bethany's courses, like, you know, if at these writers conferences, if you're not having fun, then don't do it. Like if you're not having fun sharing whatever you're sharing on Facebook or Instagram, if it's not you and if it's not personal, if it's not, I mean, obviously you can be strategic about what that is, but if you're not having fun with it and it's not inspiring you to kind of go, then, you know, you just got to figure out what works for you and kind of the connection of all those different parts of your platform. It's just something that made sense to me, as I was kind of moving forward in some of the stuff and trying to build some of that platform and get more email addresses and do all, which I've done. I mean, it has helped me do a lot of that. So, so it's been good.
That's great. That's great. Well, why don't we have, if you want to come back on and then,
this went so fast.
I did. It always does, doesn't it? If you have questions for Britt, you can ask him personally and live. If you have trouble getting on, let us know, because if we've taken you off, sometimes we have to put you on. And Norma is no longer in McDonald's. Are you out? Oh, you guys are outside McDonald's now.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That is so cool. Our dedicated writers chat community.
The lunch crowd moved in and they got really loud. I found my headphones, but Sophia forgot hers. So like even with my headphones, I could still hear the noise. It was too much.
Oh,
so
no.
It's beautiful out. It's not quite 80 degrees. So we're here.
That's great.
That is so fun. It looks beautiful out there.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Okay, if you're having trouble getting on and we need to help you, please say something in the chat. Okay, and if you just don't want to come on, that's fine too. Sophia commented that ultimately the connection is what people will remember, going back to our talking just about, you know, just being yourself and just doing it. So, okay, there's Mary. All right. LaDonna's with us. Does anyone have a question or about podcasting or Phoenix roasters or fiction writing fantasy that crosses Narnia with Games of Thrones? I will admit, I watched the last 2 episodes of Games of Thrones. It's the only time I've ever watched that show, but I watched the last 2.
Okay, so like people are really disappointed.
Yeah, they were.
Like that is what people are talking about. Right, this is the perfect time to market your book because people are the finale.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Myself in the finale, even though I didn't. I know what happens, and I'm like, I really liked the character of Daenerys.
Yeah.
All right,
Norma.
I have a question.
Norma
Yes.
had a question.
On your podcast, can one podcast be various topics, or does each podcast have to be focused on basically one theme?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, I would say, I guess it depends on what you mean. Like for us, because it's kind of writing. So there's a really broad. There's a lot of topics that can come under writing, right? I mean, so I get to interview authors. I get to interview people who do stuff well. Like I did Cody Moorhead for graphics, like, so you can be really diverse even under like a broad heading. But I would say, you have to make it distinctive somehow too, right? There has to be a distinction. Like my ministry one is called Kingdom Over Coffee, right? And I'm doing that because I work at a coffee company, and we're talking about the kingdom, right? And so it gives you like a brand, it gives you like a little niche, it gives you like a little something that makes it a little distinctive. So I would say yes and no, right? I mean, like you can find a brand and something that's distinctive, but have it be broad enough where you can bring in, a lot of different kind of topics. I don't know if that makes sense, Norma. Did I answer it?
Yep, that was good. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, big truck coming by. I couldn't mute fast enough. Sorry.
I have a WordPress website, and they have their own kind of system that they like to go through. What are your thoughts on that?
You mean for podcasting?
For podcasting.
That's interesting. I haven't seen WordPress's system for that. I would probably try to use. I haven't heard anything about WordPress's system, so I can't really tell you one way or the other. I don't know that you would need it. I think there's. I mean, I don't know if you're on WordPress and it makes sense for you, and you figure it out. I think that might be. Email me, message me. I'd love to hear about it. Like I said, I think there's a lot of other hosting platforms that are designed more for podcasting. I would probably suggest to do, because you can always integrate that with WordPress. But if integrating with WordPress or with a website is a big deal, then yeah, go with WordPress. Do what they're doing, right? I mean, like I said, make it simple. But sorry.
No, and then we'll have you as a guest on Writers Chat to tell us all how to do it.
Yes.
I'm going to try to ask a question about the traffic, but I've been looking at Twitch a lot, and I'm thinking that write your own story as you go. That might be a really fun format to do something like that, where people vote up responses a lot of times. My husband is very interested in it, and gamers are really interested in it, and I think that that's an indication of the next coming wave. Have you ever seen anything writer-oriented on Twitch?
And for those of us who don't know, can you kind of explain first what Twitch is?
Twitch is what we told our kids would never happen. Twitch is where your kid can go on the internet, play a video game, and people will pay to watch them play. I mean, that was my understanding. But it's live video streaming, and I saw it mostly of gaming at first. There's the Final Roll, which is it's a D&D game where they all kind of video their games, or they live stream their games, and they chat, and they have this camaraderie with themselves and with their audience. Watched musicians who just have a studio set up, and they'll play for a certain amount of time, and the audience can vote up or down which songs they want to hear. And I think sometimes it's even monetized.
Wow.
And I thought, what if you did an adventure and you had people vote for the next step that your story takes, and perhaps get it sponsored or something. I don't know.
Which is kind of what you're doing with your Choose Your Own Adventures in a way, but
yeah, but
right,
allow,
it's a
but
different
it's not
platform.
built in to have the viewers participate in a way that's measurable.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, I know about Twitch, so but viewers are generally interact anyway with it, right? I mean, that's kind of part of the whole platform, right? That viewers interact with people doing those things, right? Yeah. So I actually think that's a really creative idea. Here, as a writer, here's what I would do. I would try to find a way to try to find readers who are also gamers. Like how can you find people who are gamers and connect with them somehow through that platform? If that's a platform that you're, I don't know how Bethany feels about
makers. Real makers would have the
That's
audience.
right, they
Right,
would.
But and you know, like somehow connect what you're writing with the game that you're playing, right? You know, like I've got a friend and I was talking with him about what are some nonfiction, we were just brainstorming. I said, what are some nonfiction books you could put out? And he said, well, what if I did a book on this topic that goes right along with like the sci-fi series that I want to eventually publish, you know? Like in other words, like how could you connect what's going on in the gaming world? Because so much gaming now is story based. And that's why people get, addicted to it, for lack of a better term, right? That's why they get addicted to it, because it's so story based. You want the story to go on. And so if there was a way for you to try to connect that somehow, I think that's a great idea.
I just posted a link in the chat. And so for those of you who can't see the link, it's on skyward.com. And basically it's the $1 billion platform brands are missing is the headline of the article. And it's talking about how like there's not a lot of brands using this platform, but this article is specifically saying that it's one of the most content active audiences that are just consuming. It's hard to fake followers. If you can pull in ways to, like you're saying, integrate like a gaming aspect, since that's the majority of the audience there. And then also it's 80% young male. And so like how hard is it to reach that young adult audience, specifically boys? Because right, like girls are so much easier to market to, it seems, like with social media, Pinterest, all these things. But if you're going after that young male audience, then Twitch would be where you want to go into.
Yeah, there's literally a new genre in literature now that is basically writing stories like they're video games. Like there is literally a YA genre right now that is writing stories and books like they are video games. And so like, you know, like powering up and going to the next level, and they've got all that sort of verbiage in the story.
Wow.
So if there was some way you could connect that, I think it's a great idea. I mean, it sounds very creative to me, and it sounds like it would be really interesting.
Yeah, and it's also saying entertain first and then advertise second. So interesting. It's very interesting.
Okay, Leslie had one more question, and then, you know, we're going to need to kind of wrap up here a little bit. But she asked, where's the best place to have a podcast, on your blog or on Facebook? And I guess you mean just as far as where to post it? Because they're going to be like on iTunes or SoundCloud or something like that.
Yeah. So whatever you do with a podcast. So this is a part of it that I didn't share. So I'm glad we got back to this. Whatever hosting site, you're going to have to connect it to your iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, you know, Spotify. You're going to have to connect it to your account. So you're going to have accounts in whatever you want to post it on, and then you have to connect it to the hosting. So Carissa, you know, you asked about WordPress. Whatever they have, you're still going to have to somehow go onto those other platforms and have your own account. And I would say both. I would say put it on Facebook and on your website, because the more you have it on the internet, the more searchable it is, right? And so if you can you post it on Facebook, but then, like Bethany will tell you, put everything you do on your website. And right, Bethany? I listen. I really do.
I was just going to there, right? I'm glad you said it.
And here's the thing. The best place to learn about podcasts is to listen to podcasts and go to their websites, see, especially the big ones, see their show notes. Like, what do they do on their show notes? How do they post on their blog, which is basically what we do with Brew and Ink on Serious Writer every couple of weeks. We just post on the blog, do some show notes. Here's some links. Here's the episode. And so as many places as you can post it, the more searchable it is, I think. Right, Bethany? Did I do good? Did I do well?
I agree 100%. I would have like I'm glad you brought up show notes, because that would be the equivalent of like maybe a couple hundred words about the episode, or some takeaways and links and things. And you got to remember, people are consuming it all different times of day. If they're at the office and they can't turn on the sound, you can give them some value by having the show notes there, or some links that they can go look at, because they might be able to listen to the podcast later. And then vice versa. Some people won't read the show notes at all. They'll just put in the headphones. And putting it on your blog and social media is good, because, Britt, you said this at the very beginning, it's hard to do social through podcast. And I agree. Like, if I'm at the gym, which is like where I listen to the majority of the podcast, I don't have time to be on my phone maneuvering to get a share or a like to share the podcast with my audience. I hardly ever do that. So I rarely share podcasts with people, but I will talk about it maybe in a different aspect. So you can't look at that you can't look at the likes or shares as a metric of how well your podcast is doing. You've got to go back to what Britt said. How many listens did you get? How long did they listen? Where did people drop off? That's the kind of stuff you got to know. Yep. Because I don't think you'll get an accurate view based on social media shares, because it's just a different ball game. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Me, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, because I'm the same way. When I listen to a podcast, I go to my iTunes account, my iTunes app on my phone, and listen to my podcast. Like, I might hear about a new podcast through friends or through maybe even social media, but I'm not doing that through social media. I might hear about it that way, but if I like a podcast, I'm going to go to my iTunes. That's what people do all the time when they talk to me. They're like, "Oh, you've got a podcast? Where is it?" And they just go to their iTunes or their Google Play or Spotify, and they just look for it, and they find it, and they subscribe.
That podcast icon. That's where I go.
Yep.
Oh, in fact, Justin and I have a shared. I didn't know we were sharing podcasts, so all of a sudden I'd get flooded with all these podcasts, and I started deleting them, and he said, "You got to stop, I can't find it." I'm like, "Oh, I got Gary V and then a couple others." He was like, "Stop." So if you're doing a family sharing, you just might want to be conscious that other people might be adding podcasts into your account.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been really great. We appreciate all the information that you've given to us. Thank you to everybody that's here today. And also, if you're watching the replay, we invite you to join us every Tuesday morning, practically every Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. Also, to join our Writers Chat Facebook group, or check out the Writers Chat Facebook page, where you can see past episodes and get those links too. Our guest next week is my agent, Tamala Hancock Murray, and she's going to be here. We're just going to talk about the publishing industry, kind of her thoughts on where it's headed, where we're going, trends, just have a conversation from a literary agent's point of view on publishing today. So that should be really exciting. We're really excited to have her here. And then that's another little plug. June 4th, Bethany will be giving us an update on the book expo, because she will be there in New York shortly before that. So that's going to be a lot of fun too. So thank you for being with us. I invite you to stay on for the after party, but those on the replay. And we thank you again for listening. And we're going to tell you guys goodbye. See you next week on Writers Chat.